Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief, the weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzes. I'm here with Carrie Aleveld, and today we're going to be talking about the Republican Civil War. And it is a doozy. These guys are not pretending anymore. We have a Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump wing, and a Mitch McConnell, Senate Republicans wing. And what we have is a situation where yes, what Tucker Carlson's doing and what Donald Trump are doing is beyond the pale. But it's not Republicans pushing. I mean, it's not Democrats pushing back. It's not like the media pushing back. It's other Republicans. I mean, we can actually sit back, have our bag of popcorn, soda, and enjoy the show because, Carrie, have we ever seen anything like this in modern politics?
I just have to say, Trump is just the gift that keeps on giving. And I don't want to get overly animated today because I'm still on the path to recovery, and I might just like break out in a fit of coughing spasms if I laugh too hard. But it is, we have the CPAC event, which happened, the conservative
Political Action Committee conference.
Yeah, Political Action Committee conference, right? And that has been totally MAGAfied. It's all Trump now. It used to be, young sort of grassroots activists, to some extent, but it represented a younger, fresher audience for Republicans. And now it is just all Trump. It's all Trump. And then,
DeSantis skipped it. So anybody that's not in the Trump orbit was not welcome there.
Right, exactly. Not welcome there. And DeSantis, smartly probably skipped it because there's no good place for him there, really. And he did his own fundraiser with like well-heeled donors out in California, about 1,000 of them, but so that he would have something that he was doing besides just skipping CPAC. But and then you have the Tucker Carlson. It's almost like there's like a Tucker Carlson wing of Fox. And, he comes out with this totally whitewashed footage of January 6th after House Speaker Kevin McCarthy gave him unfettered access to all of this footage from January 6th. And I just have to say, it's a security nightmare. Let's just start with that. It's a security nightmare that all of this footage would have been given to, pro-Pootie Tucker Carlson, right? When the January 6th committee aired the footage that they aired from January 6th, they passed all of it by, I think, the FBI and maybe the Capitol Police before they did it, to make sure that the camera angles that they were using, that type of stuff, wasn't gonna give away the game on where all the cameras were, where all the security stuff is.
Get the process and how to evacuate hallways and doors that maybe people don't know exist.
Right.
Absolutely.
So Kevin McCarthy, probably because he was, this is one of the deals he made with Marjorie Taylor Greene, just hands over all the footage to Tucker Carlson exclusively, and
couldn't explain why though. Yeah. Nobody can. He couldn't justify the reason why. Oh, the American people. No, it's not about the American people. You could have released it to CNN if it was the American people.
Right. So then you've got the Senate Republicans all up in arms because, most of the Senate Republicans, because they can't afford to be, part and parcel of the crazy wing of the House maniacs. If they're going to win some of these, elections in statewide elections in swingy states. And they have a clear path to taking the majority in 2024. And yet, Trump and his cohort, all of his MAGA allies, could still ruin it for them, just like they did in 2022. And then finally, you've got, these are the three areas we're sort of going to cover today. Trump at CPAC, this whitewashing of the January 6th insurrection and, deadly January 6th insurrection, and the McConnell reaction of the McConnell wing to it. And then finally, the Never Trumpers, who are a pretty sad lot, who've been reduced and sort of banished from their party, have no path forward, don't know how they're going to, if the party's even salvageable, and what kind of political future they have, where they have any sort of political home, because they really don't. They had their own event, the Principles Summit, over the Principles First Summit, I think, over the weekend. And that was like a pity party, but at the same time, the one thing they could delight in was how badly all of Donald Trump's candidates did, the MAGA cohort of candidates did in the midterms. So here, this is the Republican Party. Like, this is what's left. It's just like everybody. It is mayhem. So let's start at the top.
Wait, Carrie, I want to just sort of underscore that, because the old Republican Party, it was never a unified Republican Party. There was factions, and we saw that in every primary election. So the old Republican Party was the establishment wing. All they cared about was lower taxes, right? They don't care about nothing else. There was the
and the neocons. And the neocons. Oh yeah, sorry, you're adding them all up together. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And the neocons were really part of the establishment. So it was all like think tankers and the respectable DC kind of Republicans. Then you had the religious Republicans. The Huckabee, Ted Cruz. Trying to inject religion in public. Yeah, exactly. And then you had the Tea Party. Back then, it was the Tea Party. So it was the Sarah Palin, populists. And we've seen an evolution from that. So can you reiterate your breakdown of the modern Republican Party? We still have the establishment wing.
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth, I have to admit. The establishment wing is what most people refer to as Mitch McConnell and his allies, right? People who, let's be clear, they did as much to ruin the Republican Party as anyone, because they let Trump walk all over it and never did anything about it.
They broke the Senate. I mean, we can go on and on. The reason
we can go on and on.
It's because of Mitch McConnell.
But they're not quite as crazy. Is that true?
It's all relative.
Okay, sorry.
It's true. It's true.
Scratch that from the record. No, sorry. So
they only care about tax cuts. They are happy to use the fundies to get their tax cuts, and that's their undoing.
They really only care about power and tax cuts. That is it. And so you can find Mitch McConnell making common cause sometimes with like President Joe Biden on Ukraine, right? So that's, there are some things that he can actually find agreement with Democrats on.
It's weird.
So it's weird. I kind of shy away sometimes now from calling it the establishment, even though everybody's kind of used to that, because truth be told, Trump is the establishment of the Republican Party now. The McConnell wing, the establishment wing, has been relegated to very little. They represent very little of the electorate. They still have money and power with a lot of donors, but they weren't able to leverage any of their power in order to get the candidates they wanted in 2022. That was left completely to Trump. Trump pretty much owns most of the state parties, and that's where a lot of the establishment power comes from, is being able to figure out, well, how are you going to do the nominating process, and what kind of advantages are certain candidates going to get in the nominating process. So I actually see, even though Trump has totally painted himself as anti-establishment and seems to, and wears that as sort of, a cloak of pride, right? He's really GOP establishment at this point. There's far more people invested in voting for Donald Trump, being with Donald Trump, than there are the establishment wing of the parties. I mean, Mitch McConnell is like notoriously one of the most unpopular
for sure,
lawmakers in the country. And then, of course, there's the never Trumpers, the anti-Trumpers, most of whom are pretty reality based. I mean, we wouldn't agree with them on a lot of policies, but they're not science deniers for the most part. They aren't election deniers for the most part. And they're mainly pro-democracy types. And I think of someone like Liz Cheney, who I agree with her on like almost nothing other than we have a constitution. When Joe Biden legitimately won the election, the peaceful transfer of power is absolutely necessary to maintaining this republic. And those are the never Trumpers. You know, people, we had Sarah Longwell on, I don't know, what, 2 or 3 episodes ago. She's a never Trumper. She identifies as an independent now, but you know, she's kind of lost in the woods. She doesn't have a home.
Yeah,
She's
and
yeah,
the MAGA movement did a really good job of subsuming both the Christianist wing of the party, the fundies, and the Tea Party crowd. And it's still like shocks me just how effective Trump has been doing that, given his own obvious lack of religiosity. He doesn't believe in any God. He doesn't go to church. He doesn't even pretend to go to church. Yet they've invested so much in him, and a lot of it is he delivered with the Supreme Court and and killing Roe v. Wade. But so yeah, it's been in it. It doesn't give a lot of room for the Ted Cruz's types to to mount the primary challenge, because right now Trump has that locked up, and we'll have a whole other episode on the dynamics of the Republican Party as it shakes out. But today we're going to be talking about
let's listen to Trump at CPAC as he disparages what we used to think of as the establishment wing of the Republican Party, which is kind of like the Mitch McConnell wing now, is what I would think of it as.
When we started this journey, a journey like there has never been before, there's never been anything like this. We had a Republican Party that was ruled by freaks, neocons, globalists, open border zealots, and fools. But we are never going back to the party of Paul Ryan, Karl Rove, and Jeb Bush.
Aha. Never going back. Never going back. I mean, so let me say one other thing, because what you brought up, DeSantis, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is really Trump's main rival at this point, at least in terms of the polling, name recognition, et cetera. Anytime Trump talks about the establishment, Jeb Bush in particular, things like that, he is taking a swipe at DeSantis, because Jeb Bush, I don't know if you heard it, but Jeb Bush gave this kind of amazing endorsement of DeSantis 2 weekends ago, and was like, he's a fresh face in the Republican Party and a new generation, and I think we're going to have change. I hope there's going to be change. And he's obviously talking about change away from Trump. But, he gave him this sort of glowing Jeb Bush embrace of DeSantis. And I'm sure DeSantis people were like, uh-oh, get on the horn to Jeb and tell him to walk that back ASAP, because that is a killer for us to have us painted as establishment Jeb type of candidacy, right? So sure enough, Jeb did a few days later say, "Oh, I wasn't endorsing him. I was just, I was just saying nice things." It was absolutely, the only thing he didn't say was, "I endorse Ron DeSantis to be the next president of the United States." But short of that, he said everything else that he could have said. So anyway, so now what Trump is busy doing is painting Ron DeSantis as an establishment type, a career politician, a guy who was in Congress before he was governor of Florida, and took some Social Security votes, like let's raise the age, let's cut it down, all of those things that he's no longer, he's going to disavow all that stuff now. But Trump is going to paint him as this kind of Jeb Bush establishment guy who then turned on a dime and is totally inauthentic, right? So anytime you hear Jeb Bush, think, okay, that's a knock at Ron DeSantis right there. So
anyway, what is the globalist?
I mean, he may as well have said George. I know you may as well have said George Soros, and yeah, I mean, it is so. So you've got Trump at CPAC there, right? And he's calling the old establishment wing, the McConnell wing, freaks and fools, right? And everybody's kind of laughing along with that. Okay. So now let's just fast forward a few days. That was over the weekend. Then we get this Tucker Carlson footage of January 6th, which is like completely whitewashed. There are a few seconds here and there of like people kind of walking, roaming the halls of the Capitol as a suggestion that there wasn't violence, people didn't die, officers weren't physically assaulted, etc. Like, I just want to be clear about what happened on January 6th. It was so bad that more than 999 people are facing federal or local charges. 326 of them have been charged with assaulting, resisting, or impeding officers or employees. And 140 officers were assaulted at the Capitol on that day, including 60 Metropolitan Police officers, 80 Capitol Police officers. And people lost their lives. I mean, one MAGA person was shot. Brian Sicknick was an officer who shortly after that suffered a heart attack, I think, or was it a brain aneurysm? I'm sorry, but he passed away, and most likely directly related to what happened, the trauma of what happened on January 6th. And I apologize to him and his family for not knowing the exact cause of death, but I pretty much chalk it up to January 6th. So anyway, it was a serious event. And then Tucker Carlson releases this footage that makes it look like it was another walk in the park. There were a few, may have been
tourists.
A few
tourists.
What?
There were
What'd
tourists. They were tourists.
Oh, tourists, right? Tourists. They were just having a big Capitol. Yeah, right.
And he had video of just two people just casually strolling, and that was his big reveal, because that was the only video of that entire evening. It's these two people casually walking down the hallway.
And then you have the MAGA-ites of the Republican Party, like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, "Thank you, Tucker Carlson," and Senator Ron Johnson, who's just been reelected and doesn't have to worry about reelection for 6 years, tweeting out things like, "The truth is beginning to be revealed," right? Okay, but the core of Senate Republicans are aghast because this is election denial of things like January 6th and whatever. It failed miserably in 2022, and they know it. They're hyper aware of it. So let's cue up a couple senators' immediate reaction to this Tucker Carlson video, which was released on Monday evening, I think, and it was the footage. And we've got these are all Republican senators: Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, Tom Tillis from North Carolina, and then you're going to hear Mitch McConnell taking the side of the Capitol Police.
I think that breaking through glass windows and doors to get into the United States Capitol against the orders of police is a crime. To somehow put that in the same category as a permitted peaceful protest is just a lie.
I think it's bull. I was down there, and I saw maybe a few tourists, a few people who got caught up in things, but when you see police barricades breached, when you see police officers assaulted, all of that, or you had to be in close proximity to it. If you were just a tourist, you should have probably lined up at the visitor center and came in on an orderly basis.
With regard to the presentation on Fox News last night, I want to associate myself entirely with the opinion of the chief of the Capitol Police about what happened on January 6th.
And the chief, there in that video, Mitch McConnell is holding up a statement from the chief of the Capitol Police that was a total rebuttal. He has up until now, that chief of police has tried to kind of stay out of the political, maelstrom related to January 6th. But today, he was like, there's no way we're just going to let that stand when so many of our people got hurt. And are still living with the trauma and the PTSD from that day. So he came out with a strong statement rebutting it and saying how unconscionable it was. The footage, the Tucker Carlson, tourist stroll in the park type video. So there we go. We've got I mean, the latest thing is there was this it was a little bit of a puff piece in the Washington Post. I mean, it wasn't exactly like a tongue bath, but about Republican Senator Steve Daines and how he was going to be able to bridge this divide during the the 2024 elections between the McConnell wing that wants very electable senators to run or candidates to be senators to run, and Trump, who totally, who picked complete losers down the line for Republicans in the midterms. And the idea was that Steve Daines, has like a good relationship with people in the Trump orbit. I think like Jared Kushner and some others. And that he was going to be able to like walk this line between finding the right candidates that would both please Trump and please McConnell. And, this is Steve Daines is going to be running the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So he's running the arm of the Senate Republicans that's going to be working on to regain the majority in 2024. And the idea was that somehow he was going to be able to make peace between these two sides and settle on candidates that would be more electable than Trump's original candidates. And he was quoted in the piece as saying, "I'm going to try to be forthright when I have misgivings." I mean, I'm kind of ad-libbing this a little bit, but he's like, "I really think that people appreciate the honesty, even if they agree with you." Oh, yes. Donald Trump, there's no one who appreciates honesty like Donald Trump. I mean, that is just, that gets him every time. So, I mean, it's just laughable. It's just laughable. I don't know. Do you want to weigh in here? I've been talking a long time.
You've been absolutely great, and you're spinning a great yarn. I mean, this is a great story, and the Republican, this divide is pretty much unreachable. To imagine that you have Donald Trump, who's literally cost him 3 elections in a row. They lost 2018. They lost everything in 2018. He lost re-election, which incumbent presidents just do not do very often. 2022, you got all the conditions you need. You have the inflation, high gas prices. Joe Biden's approval rating is in the high 30s, low 40s, not looking so hot. And it has all the proper conditions for a wave election, which is typically what happens in a midterm election. And they lose it. Yeah, okay, they won the House by a sliver because of redistricting, not because they actually won more votes. They drew themselves slightly better districts that allowed them to win. And there was a drop-off in voting in New York and California amongst liberals, and that cost us in a lot of really close races in both those states. It's not going to happen in 2024. I mean, the House, I'm pretty confident, is going to go our way. But you have a party that 3 elections in a row they've lost because of Donald Trump's presence. And then also have lost because of focusing on, the sexuality of M&M cartoon candies and Dr. Seuss something or other. And you sort of, particularly college-educated suburban voters, women, but we've seen hints that maybe even college-educated suburban white men may be starting to feel a little antsy about the direction of the Republican Party. And here you have Trump again keeping, a great deal of support despite basically driving the party off the cliff for the last 3 election cycles. And you have the House doubling down on woke culture and CRT, and you got DeSantis burning books in Florida, and his new appointee to the higher education committee in the state wants to purge Florida's universities of liberals. I mean, they're sort of like doubling down on a thing that cost them a midterm election where they should have won. Didn't cost them a 50-50 election narrowly. They had like a 10-point advantage just by the fact that it was a midterm election and Joe Biden's numbers sucked. Yet they lost that election, and here they go. So you have Mitch McConnell, who is an a-hole on pretty much everything. He's
right.
The reason we are where we are today, and abortion was a big factor in the midterm election. That's on McConnell because
that's on McConnell.
Justices are his. He's the one that blocked Democratic appointees to the Supreme Court, allowing that strong conservative majority. So he's suddenly realizing that, man, I should have voted for impeachment. Maybe we should have let Obama have Justin Garland on the Supreme Court. Like, maybe I should have done those things. And they'd be in the majority right now. Undoubtedly, they'd be in the majority right now. So he's thinking, okay, how do I mitigate the damage? I don't know if he has enough self-awareness to admit to himself that he's the root cause of a lot of this. But at the very least, he's thinking we cannot continue going down this path. And so you have the situation, which is still blowing my mind, where he's agreeing with Biden on Ukraine. He's agreeing with Biden on the debt limit. He's agreeing with Biden on some other things that like every.
He was at it. He did that photo op with him in the bridge that goes between Ohio and Kentucky, right? I mean, is that right?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the bridge, but
He
that
did
was
that.
part of the infrastructure package. Yep.
Right. He told, he was saying that Rick Scott, he agreed with Biden that cutting security was a bad idea. And how could Rick Scott get reelected senator in Florida if he was going to gut Social Security? I mean, he sounds like one of ours, and I don't want him. But if it means that they're going at each other the way they are, I mean, it is absolutely amazing. So you have the old establishment. I know you don't want to call them the establishment. Let's call them the old establishment.
They're kind of like the old establishment. Yeah.
The old establishment going after MAGA. And then you have DeSantis and Trump going after each other for the MAGA vote. I mean, they're going for the same pot right there.
Right.
And so it's created a situation where, if you're a Democrat, you can just sort of sit back and watch the show unfold. We have no say in it. It's not like we can influence it in any way. So, so there's, I guess it's fun to sit there and enjoy it. But I do wonder, Carrie, and I'm curious what your thoughts on this. Did Tucker Carlson shoot himself in the face by releasing that video, or that really slanted, dishonest, lying segment on the tourist at the Capitol Hill? Because the reaction from a lot of Republicans has been fierce. They are pissed.
Yeah.
This is not a question of like, oh, we have a mild disagreement. They are livid. And I do wonder if Tucker Carlson overstepped, and particularly in the context of the Dominion lawsuit, where we already found out that all those Fox News personalities knew they were lying about the big lie and did so anyway because they wanted to keep the audience from moving on to Newsmax or One American News Network.
Well, this is such a typical MAGA playbook, though, right? When anybody else would say, "Oh my God, it's time to retreat. Oh my gosh, we should be careful what we say and what we do." Instead, you just come out and you completely double down on totally, ridiculous nonsense. On one of the things that has been probably most highly followed and most highly publicized over the past year, which is how violent the attack on the Capitol was. And this is just, I don't know at what point these guys are going to get their comeuppance, right? Is that the Dominion suit, by most accounts, isn't going to cost Fox enough to undo them, even though it could cost them billions. It's also not a slam dunk case. It's really hard to prove defamation, even though there's an abundance of evidence here. It's still not slam dunk. But so we don't know.
I might disagree with that, but the courts can always go in directions you don't expect them. So
I just don't know. I just know that people who've covered defamation cases are like 1 in 10 every succeeds. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like,
but the problem with defamation is it's hard to prove that actual malice. And in this case, they literally have the emails from Fox News executives saying, "Yeah, we know it's a lie, but we need to keep the ratings." So
right, except for some of them, like Maria, what's her name, Bartiromo or whatever her name is. I can't even remember her name. Yeah. She may have been actually stupid enough to believe the Sidney Powell stuff. I mean, there might be, you might be able to get one, but not the other. It's hard to know for sure. But in any case, I'm just saying, you're asking me to make a judgment about whether Tucker Carlson has gone too far. And I don't think Tucker Carlson will have gone too far until MAGA becomes something that has gone too far. Right? I mean, it is the reason Republicans keep going on Fox and they can't rid themselves of Fox is the same, and even some Democrats for a while. I mean, now there's this discussion among Democrats. Should we even ever be going?
Oh my
Should we
freaking gosh.
advertise? Should we be doing anything on Fox? Because it's so clearly just a arm of the Republican Party now. But as long as Fox wields sort of the power it does with this audience that is just like, mainlining all of these, like all of this conspiracy BS and, delusional stuff that they come up with, as long as it has the pull in the Republican Party and continues to, what Tucker wants to do is maintain a hold on the MAGA base. And the MAGA base is going to eat up that footage. They're going to eat it up.
Yep.
And I actually, in some cases, Trump has been warring with Fox a little bit because he thinks they've been giving DeSantis too much coverage. Can you believe that? Yeah. So in some cases, Trump has been saying things like, if it were a real news organization, it wouldn't be focusing on DeSantis and this like little piddly press conference it had. It would be focusing on me and my press conference. You know what I mean? It's like, so he's actually been lumping DeSantis and Fox News together as establishment. He'll change on a dime if suddenly Fox News starts covering him more and covering him as the front runner of the campaign. But I got to take a break for a second. I need to have a sip of water.
All right. No, I do wonder though if Mitch McConnell, who's buddies with Rupert Murdoch, and Rupert Murdoch in those Dominion emails clearly expresses unease at the lies and allowing those lies to go. What happens if Mitch McConnell says, Rupert, you're killing us. Like we can't have this Tucker stuff anymore. Tucker, I mean, I guess he'll find a home at Newsmax. I don't know if they can afford him, but I mean, he'll land somewhere. Although Bill O'Reilly, I mean, we don't hear him. He's got his podcast, but does anybody give a damn what Bill O'Reilly says? I mean, deplatform from Fox News maybe actually matters, but I do wonder if there's a point now where it's at the executive level where McConnell and Kramer and all those guys are basically telling Rupert Murdoch that this has to end and that they pull. And then if they do pull Tucker Carlson, that's going to be quite the fireworks there. So I don't think we're done here. I think this is getting vicious and they're angry at each other. And there's no sense of collegiality or civility. They really see themselves as enemies. Like I don't even see this level of vitriol against other Democrats, how angry they are at each other. And so it's I mean, I love it. It's delicious.
It's delicious. And there's no way that they're gonna like, rally around each other and find a way to make this an easy situation going into 2024. They are going to be at each other's throats. And especially if Trump wins the nomination or even doesn't win the nomination, but is still in contention for it. And Senate Republicans are playing big in the primaries and trying to make sure that they have real candidates that can win in the primaries. That is going to get so contentious and so scrappy and nasty. Now, let's not leave our listeners and viewers without one more pillar of this whole, GOP array of things happening, which is the principals first, the Never Trumpers, who also gathered across town. CPAC, I think, was in Maryland,
so
and in downtown DC, we had the principals first people gathering, and you have to appreciate this. I mean, my favorite quote comes from Barbara Comstock. Okay, she's a former GOP representative. She represented Northern Virginia, I think.
She did.
And she was like a rising political star in the Republican Party, and then she got swept out in 2018 as the whole anti-Trump wave came. And she's now, speaks a little too much truth and is a little too old-time establishment, right? And her political star, which was rising, has plummeted, and she has no political future at the moment, none. So here she is, at this Never Trumper thing with other people commiserating, like, probably Sarah Longwell was there. Bill Kristol was there, longtime neocon and conservative sort of thought leader or whatever. And Adam Kinzinger, who was on the January 6th committee, former Air Force, is a veteran. So these are the type of people who are there. And they're just, let me just give you a little bit of flavor. The panels that they're having that they're at this event are things like, can the GOP survive? Like, that is a name of the panel. Here's another name of the panel. Looking to 2024. Hope and despair, but mostly despair. I mean, these are the names of the panels at this Principles First. I mean, it is
Hunter S. Thompson could have done a better job.
Yeah, it is like undoubtedly a pity party, and it's a sad little cohort of people. But the one thing that they can't appreciate is what a dismal, horrific showing the MAGA candidates that Trump picked had in 2022. So they quote Barbara Comstock as saying, they're talking to her I think Politico was talking to her in at the event. And she says, of the CPAC event, right? They ask her about this. And she says, well, it's all Loserville over at CPAC. Loserville. And you know what? She may have no political future, but she's not wrong. They have lost and lost and lost. So, they may be partying it up over at MAGA. There might be, champagne and lots of red hats and, merch. And, they're having a big time over there. But they're a bunch of losers. And she's exactly right about it. I just sort of love that. But, you have her. Let me just read a quote from, Adam Kinzinger. I mean, this is like, he was in the Air Force. He said, I had my co-pilot in the war that told me I should have just stayed a pilot because I'm a terrible politician. And he was ashamed to have fought with me. That was his co-pilot in the Air Force. This is the price that these people have paid for, trying to have some sort of reality-based pro-democracy stance within the Republican Party. And so the one thing I would say is, we may not agree with them on much, but we can agree with them on the Constitution. We can agree with them on being pro-democracy. And we can certainly agree with them on the fact that everyone over at CPAC, and it's a bunch of Loservilles over there. So
that is our show. What a better way to close it. I can't think of any better way to close the show. So that is our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Carrie, thank you so much for guiding us down this path through the Republican Civil War. Thanks to Walter, our producer. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes that helps make this show happen, like Paul and Kara. And thank you, the viewer, listener, reader, for being part of the Daily Kos community, whether it's at dailykos.com, whether it's with the brief, this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of this movement, fighting for our democracy. We are going to need to gear up again here pretty soon. But for now, we get a brief moment to enjoy the Republican infighting. And so let's enjoy that before we actually have to suit back up and head out into the political battlefield. So thank you so much for being part of that journey. Thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.